Crash, a social psychological theoretical analysis. As the backdrop for global civilizations evolved, societies acculturated an ideologic social reality of dystopian diversification, a naive interpretation of ethnic acceptance and harmony. The multiculturalist approach to improving societal perspectives in contemporary Western civilization strives to promote diversity and equal respect for all cultural groups. However, in redefining a consensus multicultural identity in America, individuals are often required to adopt American culture before ethnic roots as justification for supporting a pluralistic society. Today, many Americans believe society is equalized and fully integrated, confirming that society is more colorblind than integrated. Still, even though the heart of America's solution to alienation may cast a shadow on overt prejudice and discrimination, cultural tension across diverse socioeconomic environments persists, denied by the rationalization of ignorance. Hollywood cinema often renounces multiculturalism in depicting or promoting social conflict. Long postulate cinematic portrayals that explore the connections between personal problems and social issues raise awareness of others, allowing the audience to form opinions of society and themselves through the movies they watch. In the 2005 award-winning movie Crash, writer and director Paul Haggis exposed several social issues, including racial, ethnic, and class prejudices, to enlighten audiences that negative biases persist in contemporary society. In response to societal conformity post-9/11, in which American culture was simultaneously integrated and divided in searching for cultural identity, Haggis projected America's state of dissonance in amplifying the interconnected, stereotypical racial, ethnic, and class narratives in Crash. Crash hopes for audiences to better adopt multiculturalist concepts by relating to the screenplay in realizing everyone is affected by discrimination, racism, and oppression, and in that way, all connected. Multiculturalism, in theory, is the harmonious culmination of diverse cultures, attitudes, and beliefs synchronized within society. Multiculturalism is a way for diverse populations to retain their cultural identity and, at the same time, accept and understand others for who they are. However, the drawback of multiculturalism in action is that it redirects attention to cultural limitations imposed by society by highlighting the differences in others, which in turn leads to skewed representations of diverse populations and simplifying complex people, and the reduction of equality. Therefore, erroneous interpretations of others can influence negative attributions, leading to adverse judgments and behaviors against outgroups. Social psychological theory exploration further infers human interaction and reaction in social roles. Crash sets a dichotomous scene in intersecting several diverse characters through metaphorical and literal crashes, impacting future behaviors in exploring the promise and problem of diversity. A contemporary Los Angeles setting is a vehicle for contention as divided classes and ethnic diversities collide across an urban backdrop of racial ambiguity. Crash challenges viewers to adopt tolerance and acceptance for others by exploiting the very same reasons society fears and degrades them, which can reinforce and heighten visceral responses. In discerning the social psychological concepts depicted in Crash, more thorough interpretations can be made about the marginalized character portrayals that are purposely conceptualized to distort social reality and elicit emotional reactions. In this regard, Crash can be utilized to improve individual self-awareness regarding diversity and cultural issues and bolster collective identity and competence in realizing how personal multicultural experience elevates an understanding of others. Social cognitive theory posits individuals interpret and react to visual cues learned through analyzing the social environment. Humans form mental representations of social expectancies from observing and imitating others and elicit behavioral responses by adhering to personal beliefs, attitudes, and environmental stimuli. Furthermore, we form implicit biases towards stimuli we are most readily and repeatedly exposed to, learning to conform to social norms by preferencing and adopting the attitudes of most relatable others. In active and reactive processing, the precedence for social influence is realized, as are the processes imposing influences, such as conformity, oppression, social norms, and intergroup interaction. Ultimately, Crash depicts how people are generally cognitive misers and, in arousing situations demanding high mental energy, utilize mental shortcuts based on previously learned knowledge in reacting to dissonance, which often leads to fundamental attribution errors, stereotyping, and efforts to rationalize and justify reactions. As Crash exemplifies the power struggle for control in the relay for social identity, it reminds viewers that a commonality amongst humans is often intrinsic motivation. As recognized by Shelley and DeWitt, all humans want basically the same things in life: to be in satisfactory relationships, to raise their children and protect them from danger, to provide the family with sufficient food, water, and shelter. Though, a commonality is only a jump-off point for recognizing and accepting the differences of others. Social cognitive theory premises humans have the capacity to acclimate and accommodate new information, which can positively affect intergroup relations in eliciting behavioral changes. Crash portrays shifting character dynamics where each embrace one another, despite previous prejudices and disharmony, suggesting that subjective behavior is influenced by situational context. In realizing commonality, Crash offers an alternative view of racial discord by equating humanization with redemption. Just as negative attributions and ignorance towards others are learned, we can develop new habits to counter discrepant thinking, embracing multiculturalism as a new ideal. In contemporary Los Angeles, Crash opens with an automobile accident, symbolizing the alienation of people in urban metropolises. Detective Graham Waters, played by Don Cheadle, observes the symbolization in an opening monologue. It's the sense of touch. In any real city, you walk, you know? You brush past people, people bump into you. In LA, nobody touches you. We're always behind this metal and glass. I think we miss that touch so much, that we crash into each other, just so we can feel something. From the opening sequence, Crash moves through event sequences rapidly, by which characters intersect and evolve over an ambitious 36-hour timeline. Crash overemphasizes stereotypical portrayals of diverse people to demonstrate the interconnection between all people in that we all are biased, fallible, and fearful of the unknown. As the film moves through a series of volatile social situations, Crash renders situations that tend to bring out the worst in people. While racial discord, class struggle, and cultural divide are at the forefront of the film, it serves as a powerful platform for an alternative dichotomy between oppression and conformity and self-actualization and redemption. The projection of contextual influences and behavioral change are central to social cognitive theory and further analyzed in the following narratives as represented through character portrayals. Gene Cabot. Gene Cabot, a Caucasian-American socialite, played by Sandra Bullock, is carjacked by two African-American men, Anthony, played by Chris Ludacris Bridges, and Peter, played by Lawrence Tate. Just before the carjacking, Gene elicits a fearful reaction to the approaching two black men, which are seemingly out of place in what is expressed, by Anthony, as a predominantly white neighborhood. After the carjacking, we experience Gene exerting her implicit bigotry in the act of displaced aggression, and asserting the presence of the Mexican-American locksmith, played by Michael Pena, as a threat to her well-being based on his appearance and subsequently projecting onto her Hispanic maid. The audience can only assume that her fears and reactions elude from the presumption of an alleged affair between her husband, District Attorney Rick Cabot, played by Brendan Fraser, and his African-American assistant. However, Gene's overt frustration toward outgroups is perpetuated by Rick's request to conform to social norms by suppressing her feelings toward minorities so her husband can maintain appearances and win the majority vote in an upcoming election. Subsequently, we view Gene fall down a flight of stairs. When she reaches out to members of her in-group for support, she discovers her own alienation in adopting the views of other socialites, realizing that her maid is her only trusted and loyal friend, by which Gene, literally and figuratively, embraces her maid's cultural differences in a moment of self-actualization. Officer John Ryan. Officer John Ryan, a Caucasian-American police officer, played by Matt Dillon, is the epitome of explicit racism and white supremacy, which is experienced through several outgroup interactions throughout the film. In one scene, Officer Ryan responds to his lack of control in ascertaining medical treatment for his father by projecting his frustration and racial biases onto an African-American insurance representative. Later, in continuing his tirade of misplaced aggression, Officer Ryan subjects an affluent African-American couple, Cameron Thayer, played by Terrence Howard, and Christine Thayer, played by Tandy Newton, to unjustified racial profiling and police brutality. Officer Ryan's portrayal of white supremacy in positions of power is further realized in the Thayer's submission to authority, whereby Cameron is compelled into submission as Christine endures moments of verbal and sexual violations from Ryan. However, in a turn of events, Officer Ryan is stricken with humanity and acts to save Christine from a near-fatal car accident. Griesmer and Hitman postulated that moral emotions could arise from attributing responsibility in social interactions. Research shows that anger arises when responsibility is attributed to others, guilt emerges when responsibility is attributed to the self. Thereby guilt invokes a rise in prosocial behaviors in social dilemmas, whereby a person can repress anger to restore cooperation with others. In coming to fruition, Officer Ryan's guilt in committing previous transgressions against Christine is evoked, and he chooses to cast away any negative proclivities towards Christine, risking his own life in the process. Anthony. While raising awareness of stereotypes through monologue, Anthony self-fulfills the prophecy of the stereotypical African-American thug by holding Jean and Rick at gunpoint while stealing their Lincoln Navigator. Subsequently, Anthony also makes a fundamental error in exerting all white people are racist, seemingly motivating his criminal behavior. We later discover that Anthony's primary source of income is delivering stolen vehicles to a chop shop, as the request for the specific Navigator comes from the shop showrunner. Aligning with social cognitive theory, Aronson and Aronson emphasize that social motives are universal to social cognition and behavior, and marginalized people can go to great lengths to form their identity, find purpose, and fit in. Anthony presumably adheres to the stereotype in developing his social identity to conform to societal expectancies and norms against the backdrop of Los Angeles, a city of historical and cultural divide. In a subsequent scene, Anthony has a come-to-fruition moment when he accidentally runs over an Asian American, human, trafficker in the stolen SUV. Possibly affected by his implicit biases toward police and the realization of his criminality, Anthony decides to drop the Chinaman off at the hospital anonymously. Afterward, Anthony discovers an unoccupied van abandoned with the keys readily available, which he decides to steal and deliver to the chop shop, whereby the contents of the van, the group of smuggled Southeast Asians, are unveiled. Rather than selling the immigrants, Anthony allows them to be freed into Chinatown, reaffirming the subtlety of Anthony's socially motivated behavior. The utilization of Chinatown as a backdrop in this scene is possibly an attempt to demonstrate the interconnectedness of people and overcome colorblind ideology, as Chinatown is a historical landmark symbolizing inclusion, acceptance, and equal opportunity. We can utilize knowledge of social cognitive learning theory in practical applications. Social psychology research aims to prove that human behavior is malleable, adapting to factors in the social environment, which can shape how one thinks, feels, and acts. Moyer-Guza et al. Investigated the applicability of a transitional characterization in media to improve outgroup identification and acceptance. Social cognitive theory presumes that behavior changes will occur through modeling, which can occur through media representations. While a character may initially elicit negative behavior, depicting a transition from negative to positive is thought to reduce viewer anxiety about intergroup relations. When the audience vicariously identifies with the transitional character, they can relate to the character's attitudes and ideology, improving cultural competence. Moyer-Guza et al. Tested the hypothesis, finding a positive association between vicarious exposure and improved attitudes towards outgroups, which motivated the participants' willingness to engage in intergroup relationships. Identification with outgroup members also led to increased liking and reduced negative biases pertaining to outgroup members. Furthermore, the study revealed that the motivation to change behavior through media exposure remains consistent over time, identifying a change in viewers' attitudes and beliefs. Alternatively, Dambroskas found that embracing the ideology of improving attitudes through parasocial contact may have significant limitations and drawbacks. In 2015, in an attempt to overcome Russian propaganda, Ukraine deployed a TV program called Messigia Vilnigia. The programming produced stories of the people from the Vilnius region, which acted as a model for Lithuanians to identify with and form an understanding of ethnically diverse others and complex social issues. With the countermeasures, Lithuanians aimed to reduce minority prejudices and improve cultural unification across communities. However, because the programming exploited minority groups, its intent was not well received, and it further reinforced prejudices and potentially promoted inequality, rendering Lithuanian majority groups remain supreme. Adopting multiculturalism. Crash is a provocative and visceral film that intersects apparent social inequalities with humanitarianism. Crash can be adopted as a tool to improve cultural competency when viewers identify the difference of others, impose self-reflection to increase an understanding of diverse persons, account for personal biases. Alternatively, long-proposed viewers identify multicultural concepts in the film, point out their own origins, and then to make connections to their own multicultural identity. However, not everyone will have the same viewing experience, as we are complex beings, with differing social influences. Some viewers may assume a defensive stance against changing their beliefs and attitudes. Subsequently, Crash is a beneficial tool for persons like myself who intend to work in the mental health field. Film analysis hones a sense of observation, a skill necessary for persons in healthcare fields, as they need to observe and learn from competent, more knowledgeable others. Additionally, Crash raises awareness of controversial issues that affect others, such as stereotypes, discrimination among marginalized groups, how those with power and privilege exert their control over individuals and groups with less power, and worldviews. However, Giroux and Giroux warned that the cinematic depictions of individual and stereotypical injustices are not representative of collective problems. Nonetheless, recognizing cultural issues highlights potential challenges in working with diverse populations. Persons working in healthcare fields need to be apprised of barriers that would prevent adequate diagnosis and treatment of ethnic minorities. In sum, encouraging multiculturalism, in theory, can increase cultural unification. When individuals are accepting of others' ethnic identities, it can reduce discriminatory attitudes and behaviors. However, incorporating differences requires awareness not apparent in implicit biases. Crash reminds us that perspective is subjective. Underneath the surface, everyone tends to be preferential to what is familiar. We have to attend, learn, and adapt to new concepts consciously. Moreover, the film demonstrates that we are social beings motivated by the same basic needs. Often, fear of the unknown elicits an overwhelmingly aversive response, especially if it challenges our need for belonging. Finding commonality is proven more effective in overcoming flawed thinking and promoting prosocial behavior.